All right, well, everyone, welcome. This is the first 365 First Challenge online event. I'm very excited. Our instructor is Chris Gorges, love his last name. He's the owner of ASL Basics. He's an educator who helps thousands of people from around the world learn sign language. He specializes in helping others overcome the various challenges that come with learning a new language and helps them achieve fluency in as little time as possible. Welcome, Chris. We are looking forward to your course of instruction and sharing a first and learning some ASL sign language.
That's great. And so one of the things that I like to talk about first is actually the why and the how of learning sign language, because a lot of people will just kind of want to jump right into learning the alphabet, the numbers, and that's a really great thing to start off with. But sometimes if we skip the why and the how, we can lose traction and it can actually get really discouraging. So one of the things that I really want to focus on with particularly new students is to really kind of build that foundation and the routines into good language learning habits. So one of the things that I like to start off with is the why. And like Simon Sinek is really famous for doing this with companies, trying to figure out why, what is their purpose. And for students of sign language, that why can be a wide variety of things. Some people just want to learn for the fun of it. It can be a really fun language to learn how to fingerspell your name and to learn how to use your facial expressions and learn the signs for emotions. And it can be a really enjoyable thing, especially if you have friends doing it. And that's a great motivator. But there can be other whys that are even more powerful. So let's say, for example, you want to make connections. And especially, maybe you have a deaf relative, or maybe you're a student in school and you have a deaf classmate, or you're a business owner and you have a deaf client come back to you over and over again. And learning sign language to make that connection with that deaf person and connection with the deaf community at large can really be a powerful why. And any times that we feel frustrated, or maybe we're going through a plateau where we're struggling in one way or another, trying to remember the reason why we started to learn the language in the first place can really help us kind of push through the trials and the tribulations of learning a language. And another reason is maybe it's for personal growth. Learning another language can have a lot of growth for yourself. And those three things can be really powerful motivators, whether you're doing it for fun or for personal growth, or to make those connections with the deaf community at large. So remembering your why can be a really powerful thing to help you kind of propel that progress forward. The second thing is the how. And it might be a weird parallel, but last year I wanted to learn how to do a Rubik's Cube. It's something that I've always wanted to learn how to do. And the year prior to that, I was working alongside a teacher that was absolutely amazing. And she was teaching 8th grade, and she had a lot of students that were falling behind academically. Many of them were being tested at 2nd or 3rd grade levels for reading and for mathematics. And so she told them ahead of time, these are the things that you can start implementing to really help not only catch up to, but also to excel ahead. And watching that transition throughout the school year, to see these students that were testing at a 2nd to 3rd grade level, and by the end of that year, they were past that. Some of them were testing 10th or 11th grade. And a lot of the things that she did was focused on mindset. And mindset really does matter. Are you familiar with the quote from Henry Ford, whether you can, or whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right? And that is so true. And so anyways, with that said, like, I wanted to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I'm in my mid-30s, and I thought, like, I could solve one color or one side, but I can never finish the rest of it. But last summer, I decided that I'm going to go ahead and learn it step by step. And the following school year, some 5th grade students, some 9 and 10-year-olds, saw me solving the Rubik's Cube, and they were super stoked. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. And I said, you know what, let me teach you. And a lot of it was mindset. You know, they pick up that cube and they, you know, they play around with it like many of us probably have. And they say, well, I can't do this, or I'm not smart enough. But really, it's just walking them through step by step and kind of encouraging them to let them know that it's not necessarily a matter of I'm not smart enough, but it's that mindset. You know, if you can believe you can do something, you can really put your mind to anything, whether it's learning sign language or wanting to learn to challenge yourself doing something new every day. You know, that can really make a huge difference in whether you can or you can't do something. So yeah, so the how can be a really important thing. So I like to review like the 3 M's. There's mindset, there's motivation, and there's methods, or your methodology. And so the first one is just really that mindset and, you know, believing that you can do something. Sign language can be a really daunting thing. You know, many people can get to the alphabet and get to the numbers, start doing introductions, but if you don't remember your why and you don't really have those systems in place for your how, it can be a real challenge, and it can be easy to just want to give up. So that's why I really think that mindset matters. But to move on to the next one is that motivation. Another really big challenge with learning a new language is just finding the motivation to do it yourself. You know, a lot of times maybe we're taking a class or we're trying to learn on YouTube or we're just trying to learn online. It's really easy to either compare ourselves with somebody else and be discouraged, or to be overwhelmed and look at this, you know, I need to learn these thousands of signs. Or you go to have a conversation with somebody and you're really stoked. I know how to fingerspell my name. I know how to introduce myself. And then you go to have the conversation, and, you know, once you get past the how are yous, you know, you realize that, oh wow, I have so much more to learn. And it can be really discouraging if you're looking forward and you're looking at how much farther you have to go compared to how far you've already come. Really, like let's say you're learning sign language and you're taking an ASL 1 or an ASL 2 class, and just look back and look how far you've come just in a few months, and just celebrate those small little victories. And one of the things that was really successful with teaching those young students how to solve a Rubik's Cube is just teaching them, just learn it one step at a time. And in about 4 weeks, that one student not only learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube, but he became faster at it than I was. And then he started teaching all of his other friends how to solve the Rubik's Cubes. And pretty soon there was Rubik's Cubes all over the school, to the chagrin of all the teachers and the after-school staff and everyone. But it's like celebrating those small victories, right? And you know, sometimes it's just we have to take it one step at a time, not get overwhelmed with the long road ahead, but to celebrate those small little victories along the way. You know, if you learn how to fingerspell your name, that's a victory. If you learned how to say, how are you, and to introduce yourself to somebody else in sign language, celebrate that victory. If you're able to have a conversation without forgetting the signs that you learned a few weeks ago, that's a victory. And so much of it is just, you know, pausing and taking the time to really celebrate and realize how far you've come. And that can be a really powerful motivator for you to just continue to make that progress going forward. And the third thing is the methodology. So part of that is celebrating the small wins, but another is focus, like where to put your focus and where to put all your energy. And so there's a really powerful TED Talk by Chris Lonsdale. He's a linguist from New Zealand. And he talks about how you can learn any language in 6 months. And one of the things that he brings out in that TED Talk is learning high frequency language. And I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'll show you what I mean. There it is. So if you can see that, it says high frequency language. And if you notice where it says 85%, and it drops down to 1,000. So that's talking about the number of words you need to learn in order to become fluent in a language, or at least reach 85% fluency. And if you continue to learn those high frequency words, if you learn about 3,000 of those words, then you're able to pretty much be completely fluent at 98% fluency. So, you know, where do you spend your time and energy? It's going to be on those high frequency words. And, you know, a lot of that is learning, you know, how to introduce yourself, learning, you know, real basics like the numbers and colors and animals, and not to worry about focusing so much of your time on, you know, maybe learning vocabulary that isn't necessarily going to be useful for you on a day-to-day basis. And that kind of depends on who you are and why you're learning the language. Are you learning because you want to communicate with your toddler? And are you going to be learning baby signs? So that you're teaching them milk and potty and hungry and eat. Or are you a business owner wanting to communicate with the client? Now you're going to need to know more vocabulary around business, payments, and you know, client relations. Or maybe you're in elementary school and you have a deaf student that is in your classroom. You're going to want to learn how to learn school vernacular. So really focusing on the words and the things that you're going to need on a daily basis. That's where really what you want to dedicate your time and energy towards learning. Another thing is exposure. Let me pull up another quick graph real quick. And this is taken from a 2013 compendium that Scholastic put out. If you're a parent, you're probably familiar with Scholastic as being the ones that your kids order books from. But they did a research paper, and it's free on the internet. I have a link to it on my website. There's an article called Free ASL Resources, and you can find it there. But basically, there's the Hart Risley study, and they spent 10 years doing this study on early childhood acquisition of language, and a lot of it was focused on exposure. And so I'm going to share a graph with you really quick, and this is from the vocabulary of 3-year-olds. And the one in the purple and the one in the orange and the one in the blue. So these are the size of the vocabularies of 3-year-olds. And the difference between the children that knew less words compared to the children that knew more words was exposure to the language. And it's really interesting because the gap in between the exposure of languages was huge. In some cases, a 30 million word gap between the kids with a higher vocabulary compared to the ones that had less. And you think about that, that's a lot. And so that means the ones in the blue were probably exposed to about 15 million words in their lifetime up until that point, compared to 45 million. So, you know, a lot of that is listening to their parents talk, having conversations, singing songs, learning colors, watching videos, listening to music. And, you know, we think about how we learn and acquire languages as children. That's all, they're exposed to it day in and day out. So as adults, we kind of have to learn how to learn a language like a child, to really expose ourselves to the language as much as possible. And, you know, now's a really good time to do that. It's much easier to expose yourself to sign language now than it was 20, 30 years ago. You know, we have the internet, we have YouTube, we're able to connect with these deaf actors and actresses through social media. There are movies and documentaries and so many resources that we can just really throw ourselves into immersing ourselves and exposing ourselves to the language. And another thing too is to use what you learn. And even if it's just the alphabet, you know, signing your name can just really not only help reinforce what you've been learning up until that point, but you're making these connections with other people. And languages are really all about that. It's about human connections, and it can be between a parent and a child, or it can be between a teacher and a student. It can be just between a client and a business owner. You know, whatever it is, you're making those connections. And yeah, and just using what you know. And you think again back to a child. You know, they're not necessarily thinking about the mistakes that they're making. They're just using what words they have to try to get their point across. You know, a 1-year-old might be only making one-word sentences. You know, hungry, thirsty, potty, and you know, we're trying to guess as a parent. Well, what is it that you're trying you're hungry for what? You're thirsty for what? What do you want to drink? Number one, number two. So it's a lot of times it's a guessing game, but that child is just using what they know to try to communicate. And as adults, it's really hard to do that. It's because we're subconscious, and we don't want to make mistakes, and we don't want to look silly, or we don't want to embarrass ourselves. But those mistakes are really the best teachers, and not to be so self-conscious, and to really just have the confidence to go out there and try to make those communications happen. And I think it was Chris Lonsdale in his TED Talk. He also talked about just the power of using a lot with learning or knowing a little. So like if you only know 10 nouns and 10 adjectives and 10 verbs, 30 words altogether, you're able to put those together in different ways to make 1,000 different phrases. So if you just think about how powerful just learning a few signs can be, it can be really encouraging, and just to be able to use what you know to try to get your point across. And that can make a huge difference in making that connection with that other person. And just one more thing about methodology is one challenge that a lot of people have is forgetting and trying to remember what they're learning. And I'll try to make this really quick. There's Kevin Horsley. He's a grandmaster chess player, and he also has the world record for memorizing the most digits of pi. It's kind of a silly world record, but the number 3.14259, and it goes on and on and on and on. Well, he was able to, on demand, tell you what digit was in whatever place. And so he wrote this book called Unlimited Memory, and he talks about spaced repetition. And so if you're learning a new language, whether it's sign language or any language, the importance of reviewing what you've learned. So if you've learned maybe 5 words or 5 signs today, it's important to try to review those about 3 times before the day's over. And one way you can help remember yourself and review it later is at the end of the day, just set up your phone camera and record yourself signing those 5 signs that you learned. And so tomorrow you watch that video again and you review, and then you do that again, and you just keep building on that, and you're just constantly re-exposing yourself to what you're learning. And using that spaced repetition can go a long ways from learning something that's stored in your short-term memory to transitioning it to your midterm memory, and then finally just solidifying it into your long-term memory. And that kind of parallels with using what you know with other people too. You're constantly reviewing, and you're going back to the signs that you've been learning. So if you can just follow like the mindset, the motivation, and the methodology, those 3 things together can really go a long ways. And just remembering your why. Anytime you feel like you're struggling, or anytime you hit a plateau, it can really kind of give you the boost to go to the next level. So that's my little speech. And so I was figuring maybe I could teach you, Anne, a little sign language. We can learn how to fingerspell your name. We can tackle maybe the alphabet and introductions. So I can teach you how to introduce yourself to somebody else using sign language. How does that sound, Anne?
Yeah, well, we can definitely go around, but I can be the guinea pig, and then we can go in circles.
Okay. Any volunteers?
I'll go first, and then we'll get the others engaged.
Okay. Well, you're in a really you get it easy because you only have 3 letters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to show you the letters for A and N.
Okay.
So A is like this.
Am I doing the opposite than what I guess because when video. Okay.
Yeah, it's tough. So if you're right-handed, you'll want to use your right hand. If you're left-handed, you want to use your left.
Okay, I'm right-handed.
Okay, so you're right-handed. So you put up your right hand, you make a soft fist, and you make sure that your thumb is just touching the side of your 4 fingers like this.
Okay, that's A.
Okay, and then N, you're going to put your thumb in between your middle finger and your ring finger like this. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do A, N, and then you just finger spell it on top of each other. There's a couple ways of doing this. Some people do A-N-N, A-N-N, or A-N-N. Perfect.
Oh, cool. All right,
Okay, so 2 signs real quick. So I'm going to show you how to sign my and then name. Okay. So my is going to be a flat palm against your chest like this. My. And then name, you're going to hold up 2 fingers like this and tap, tap. Name.
So,
okay, so my, name, A-N-N.
Oh.
Perfect.
Yay.
Good job. And then deaf applause.
I'm ready for more though. I'm ready to do the alphabet. Like, I'm ready to rock and roll.
All right,
I like
let's
learning.
do the entire alphabet. So I'm going to ask for some audience participation. So as I'm signing, I'm going to ask that all of you sign with me. And when you're learning sign language, that's called shadowing. So kind of picture yourself being my shadow. And so we will start with A, and I'll go real slow. And that way you guys can shadow or copy as I go along. Okay? So we'll start with A, which we all should know. B. Good. C. D. E. Perfect. F. Okay, this is a little tricky. G. So your thumb and your index finger are going to be parallel with each other, and they're going to be flat like this. So you can kind of pretend that you're trying to balance an egg with your G. Okay, so H is going to be with your index and your middle finger. I, with your thumb crossing your fingers like this. J, you just draw a J in the air. K is another difficult one, but it's kind of like you're doing the peace sign, and then you just subtly put your thumb in between your middle and your index finger like this. K, L, M, N, O, P. So this is the exact same hand shape as K, but we're going to point our middle finger straight down at the ground for P. Okay, so Q is actually the same hand shape as G, but now our fingers are pointing down at the ground. R, S, T, U, V, W, X. So think of like a pirate's hook. This is actually like a classifier for actually like a pirate. This is a sign for pirate. But like I think of that for X marks the spot, right? So X for pirate. Y. And then Z, you just draw the Z with your index finger in the air like that, Z. How does everyone feel? That's 26 signs that you just learned.
Yeah, that was not easy. So in sign language, is it more like spelling out words or knowing words? Is it a mixture of both? How does that work?
You will use finger spelling to either like clarify a certain sign or to finger spell out things that maybe not have a sign yet. If you go to the website aslbasics.com, on the front page I have free ASL resources, and in that article there's a really interesting video that Verge Science did, and they interviewed a deaf scientist, and he was talking about the struggles of going into a field that didn't really have any signs invented for it yet. So he and a few other scientists put together this website called .org. And so he would start collaborating with other deaf scientists, and they are starting to build this language. And so, you know, they're covering fields like biology, physics, computer science. So they're tackling a lot of those different things, because if you don't have a sign for something, it can almost really be a roadblock into the conversation. And think about if we had to do that in English, if we had a hard time coming up with the right word, and all of a sudden we had to spell out, oh, I don't know, there's a word for congratulations, so I'm going to spell it out. Okay, hey, nice, I'm really proud of you, CONGAT. And, you know, to spell that out letter by letter can really be a roadblock to that conversation. Anyways, like if you have the time for it, that's a really interesting video to go check out. And it's really interesting to see how the language to this day is still evolving and changing. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, so and ASL is multi-languages, because so a dog is a dog, like it doesn't matter which language, like the sign for a dog is the sign for a dog.
So that can be tricky. So ASL is used in other languages outside of the United States. I was speaking with somebody from Dubai, and they were talking about the challenges of multiple sign languages. So they were talking about Pakistani Sign Language, Indian Sign Language, ASL. In more recent years, the Emirates Sign Language is being developed. And so in some countries, you almost have this blend of all these different sign languages coming together. And that can be a challenge for communication, because, you know, signing dog might not be the same sign in dog in another sign language. Another thing too is like it can be cultural. So like how to sign nice to meet you in Japanese sign language is different than ASL. In ASL, it's typically the sign for nice. And then you set up two classifiers, which just basically means like your handshake represents something. And so this would represent a person, this represents a person, and they meet together like this. Nice to meet you. But in Japanese Sign Language, it's different. So they would bow to each other. So they would use the same classifier, but they bow to each other. Nice to meet you. And so it's interesting that sign languages are really, they have a lot of parallels with verbal languages, where they're incredibly diverse. In some countries, there's multiple sign languages used within the deaf communities. Here in the States, it's you don't really have too many sign languages like that. You don't really have, like in Canada, they have French Sign Language, they have Quebecan Sign Language, they have ASL, and they kind of have that same issue where they have multiple sign languages being used in the same country. But in the United States, it's not, you don't really see that too much.
Okay.
The big differences is the sign language modes. And I talked about C-sign earlier, where it's signed exact English. That falls under a category of manually coded English. But there's also kind of one in the middle. It's called PSE, Pidgin Signed English. And if you're familiar with Pidgin languages at all, it's basically based off of other languages that kind of branched off into its own thing.
Okay,
so PSE, as it's referred to, is basically you're using ASL signs, but you're using it more in an English grammatical sense. But you're still dropping a lot of the articles that aren't used in ASL. So ASL is its own independent language. It has its own syntax. It has its own grammar. It has its own culture. But then PSE kind of takes that, and you just would basically sign it in a more English way.
Okay, thank you. So what about the numbers? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
So fortunately, numbers are actually a little easier than the alphabet, because most of them are gestures that we use in English. The only difference is typically if you're just signing the number by itself, your palm is facing yourself. So like instead of signing 1, you would sign 1, 2, and 3. This is the one that is a little different than English. And then 4, 5. And this is where it gets kind of cool. You can sign up to 999 with just one hand. So 6 with the pinky, 7 with the ring finger, 8 with the middle finger, 9 with the ring finger. So the smaller the number, the smaller the finger, right? 6, 7, 8, 9. And then if you get all the way up to 10, you just give yourself a thumbs up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wait, can you do that again? 1,
2,
2,
3,
3,
4,
4, 4,
5.
5.
So essentially 1 through 5 is the same as you would in just gesturing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, except for 3. So again, 1, 2, 3 with the thumb out, 4, 5. And then we're going to turn our hand back and we're going to go work our way up the fingers. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right. Man, how sore does your hand get doing this? Like, you gotta build your hand muscles.
So anyways, going back to the introducing yourself. So you could say, hello, my name, and then you would finger spell out your name. And then you could ask the question, your name, what? And then I see Madison doing, you should be a teacher someday, Madison. You're doing great. So then the next would be probably you want to ask, how are you? And so this is done a couple different ways. If you look on Gallaudet, they'll do it with a twist, how. And so you just basically put 2 thumbs up together like this and you twist one, how, you. So again, like that article R, you don't sign in ASL, you just drop it because it's not really, I don't know, I guess it's not really important, right? It's not a thing that you have to really convey. So how you becomes how are you. So I'll teach good and fine are probably the most 2 common responses. So good will come from your chin and down into your other hand, or some people will do it one-handed like this, good. And the other one would be fine. So you just take an open 5 hand shape like this, and you just tap the thumb against your chest like this for fine. So if I were to ask, how are you? You could respond good or fine.
What was good? Sorry, what was good again? I just went blank.
Good.
Good. Okay.
Fine. And you guys are all doing great.
I'm thinking right now everything I already forgot, but it's a good thing we recorded this. I get to go back and practice.
See, and that's one thing that really does help. Like when I first started learning sign language, like we didn't have iPhones and stuff. They were, okay, I take that back. They were just had come out, but they were like atrociously outpriced. Like we couldn't afford it. But like, you know, we all have these smartphones on us, and we can just, at the end of the day, just do a quick little recording and just sign the 5 or 10 signs that we learned that day, and then watch that video the next day. And really, it's not only just like that spaced repetition, but it's you know, the neurons that fire together grow together, and you know, you're literally remapping and restructuring your brain as you're learning these things. And so the more you can go back and review it, you're literally building up those connections stronger and stronger every time you review it, much like you would you know, exercise. And you know, if you do a pull-up once, it's not going to do a lot of good. But if you do a pull-up every day, you know, pretty soon you're going to be able to do more and more and more, and you're building up those muscle fibers. And your brain is very similar in how you learn. So that repetition is so important.
All right, so weird question, but what's like your favorite sign, like your favorite word?
That's a good question. Gosh, you know what? I'll probably say the sign for elephant and the sign for mosquito are probably my 2 favorite ones. Elephant because it's like really clear, because it's just, you're almost drawing the trunk off your own nose and into the air for elephant. And the other one is mosquito, which I don't know, it's kind of a silly one, but it's mosquito. And like I don't know, like I picture like this old-fashioned like cartoon where they're like hand cranking the engine to start on the car, but you're doing it to a mosquito's like needle nose. I don't know.
Love it. So we're at the top of the hour. Well, for the class. Does anybody have any other question for Chris? Well, Chris, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and I definitely, for me, it was a first. It was my first time, and appreciate everybody that came. And then we had definitely some more advanced students than me, so I appreciate your assistance and your help. And yeah, so the recording, I will make it available. Chris will have it, and I will also put it up on the 365 First Challenge Facebook page so that you can, I know I'll be going back through it so I can get what we learn in class down and get the muscle memory of it. And I think that's what's beautiful about it, is that it's not just, you're not just doing memory in your mind, you actually going to go through muscle memory when you learn the language. So I think I just started a new journey. So thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. And if somebody's watching this after the class is finished, again, if you go to aslbasics.com, right on the front page, I have a link that says free ASL resources. It's right there on the top. And I've been spending some time trying to gather some resources from all over the internet and trying to pick more viable ones. So like some of them are online ASL dictionaries. I have some that are from like ASL Pro, Signing Savvy, but I also have ones that are from like Deaf Tech. And if interpreters are watching that, there's some really solid resources like ASL core.org or Deaf Tech, where they have signs for math, they have signs for biology, and signs for lab sciences. And also I put together like free classes. Gallaudet has free classes called ASL Connect, and they teach a lot of the basics there. They teach the numbers, the alphabet, greetings, and it's completely free. It's on Gallaudet /ASL-Connect, but like all those resources are kind of all there, all in one place. I have YouTube channels that are really helpful for kind of increasing your exposure. I put together like movies and TV shows that talk about the deaf culture and include sign language, and some helpful books to not only like ASL dictionaries and things like that, but also books like Unlimited Memory, where you can use like different tricks to really help remember the things that you're learning. And you know, we might not be learning 10,000 digits of pi, but we may in the long term be learning 10,000 signs. So utilizing those types of like learning strategies and learning how to remember what we learn can really go a long way. So I encourage anybody to go ahead and check that out. If you find something and you feel like I should add it, please let me know. My email address is just chris@aslbasics.com, and or you can reach out to me on Instagram @ASLBasics, and I'd be happy to help you along and help others network. I also do ASL group practice sessions every Wednesday night to help other students network with each other. And it can be a challenge, especially during this quarantine, to meet up with others. Many classes are being canceled or being held online. You know, deaf events that have, like in our area, have been canceled, and so we're doing our best to hold those online. But yeah, just feel free to reach out to me if you want to continue to learn sign language, and if you have any questions, I'm always available.
All right, thank you. Everybody have a nice rest of your weekend, your evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you at the next event when we learn something else that's new.